All right, we're back for the All 32 pod. Mike Giardi, Will Parkinson alongside. I know we promised AFC and NFC North previews last week. Yours truly got swamped. Kids going to college, both of them at the same time. Needless to say, I got my butt kicked for about 4 or 5 days. I'm running on fumes right now, but I'm fired up to be talking to you, Will, and to get into the things that we promised, as well as some other stuff that happened this weekend, including some quarterback news.
Yeah, we are rocking and rolling. We are 2 weeks from today, or less than 2 weeks from today, like 10 days or so from the kickoff of the season. We've got two of the most exciting divisions in the sport, coming up. We'll do previews on that. We'll talk quickly a little Drake Maye, a little Zach Wilson. Does this preseason matter? Hassan Reddick potentially reporting here in the next week. So fun episode. Excited to bring it to you guys again. Make sure at the end of the episode, you guys will be subscribing, rating, reviewing. We'll keep reminding you to do so because that's how we'll keep letting the show grow.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. And as a reminder to you, the show is brought to you by Game Time. Best tickets, best prices to get you in on any event you want to see. We use it. We love it. Prize Picks also involved, our exclusive daily fantasy partner for the CLNS Media Network. So, Will, let's start with Drake Maye because I made sure that I was locked into that game last night despite the emotion of dropping the kids off. And there was a lot of emotion in that game because right away, Jacoby Brissett gets hurt. So they're saying it's not that big a deal. I guess we'll learn more here in the next 24 to 48 hours. But he was only going to play 1 or 2 series anyways. It ends up being 1. He's kind of clutching his shoulder after he got hit. Drake Maye comes in, and while not perfect, a lot of life, a lot of spark, some really athletic plays, including a touchdown that got waved off because the Patriots' offensive line was a debacle last night. 8 pre-snap penalties, including one on a 50-yard touchdown pass on essentially a busted pocket. He rolls out to his left, flings it back, cross body with the off-platform stuff to KJ Osborne. But there was a great read on his first drive, 3rd and 14. They're playing cover 1. He steps up in the pocket, pumps, and then says, nah, there's an opening. And he went. And 16, 17 yards later, it's a first down, keep the drive alive. He just has come so far in the last 2 weeks that it led Gerard Mayo on Monday morning to tell the Greg Hill radio show on WEI here in Boston that Drake has outplayed Jacoby Brissett for the last 2 weeks. And I would say it's actually more like the last 10 days, starting with the Eagles preseason game, week number 2. And we had talked about that quite a bit about why didn't they get him more playing time and more immersion in the first game? Would he be further along? I continue to believe he would be. But again, great progress right now. And there's a debate. And I think the debate is not just from the outside looking in. I think the debate is internally, should Drake Maye start week 1, or are they just better served trying to figure out this offensive line, which, as I mentioned, was an absolute debacle in front of Maye and Brissett in week 3, and let sort of Jacoby take the hits for the first month or so and then hope you settle things down by October and then you make the transition.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in terms of, I think we've talked so much about just letting him play and getting him that experience. I think it's part of what the preseason's for. Again, very simplified defenses, lack of talent, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, getting Drake Maye more and more reps. And we see that even in a preseason game, running out the starters, and a lot of teams didn't play starters over the weekend. I know the Jets got some heat. Oh, they haven't played starters all the time. Well, Jacoby Brissett goes out there. Yeah, we'll get a series or 2 in there, and he gets – driven to the ground on a sack because a guy misses a block. And then, he obviously the Patriots are lucky he avoided any type of serious injury, but we've seen that before a million times. Be out, broken collarbone, the Tony Romo, Dak Prescott situation. We've seen Aaron Rodgers in the past break the collarbone, all that stuff. So I say like Drake Maye is extremely talented. I think we all know that. I think he's a guy who needs time. That said, we'll see if they give him time. I think in the ideal world, like Drake Maye plays weeks 9 through 18 and gets 8 or 9 starts this year. The Patriots get him enough experience, but he has time to sit and watch the game. I just think at the same time, we talked a little bit about this. The difficulty with Maye is going to be, you always for that soft landing spot, quote unquote, for young quarterbacks or even guys coming in. I don't know where the soft landing spot potentially is. Maybe it's week 5, but early on with the Patriots, it's either you start him right away and just say, hey, buddy, here we go. I still think it'll be Brissett. It still feels like, to me, that's really what the organization as a whole has kind of talked a little bit about. That said, he's not going against the Jets defense week 3 on a short week in a road game. Again, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle, but I don't know, sustainability-wise, that's good. So again, I think it's either May is going to play week 1, and he's improved each week. I feel like we all like what we've seen, but it's him playing week 1, or I think it's probably more like week 5 or 6, maybe even a little bit longer. So Brissett is who he is. It's not going to wow you. He's not going to suck. He's kind of just there and exists, and he's a solid leader, solid quarterback. But yeah, it's exciting if you're a Patriots fan. I think this season, again, is so much about the quarterback, and yesterday was a flash of these big-time plays, these off-platform throws, some of the athletic ability. That's what you're investing yourself in, and any type of wins, obviously, is kind of gravy on top.
Yeah, there was some buzz about the game last night, and there's certainly been buzz as we record this on Monday afternoon about the performance and, again, about the comments from Mayo and whether or not they should take the dive right away and just say, it's you versus Lou Anarumo in Cincinnati in week 1, and we'll live with it. You know, the other pushback on this is just that I think when you want to turn to Drake, I think you just want it to be Drake. You don't want to have to go, Drake, this isn't going well, bring Jacoby back into it, and then come back to Drake again. It's like when you turn the keys over to Drake, barring anything disastrous, I think you just want to keep the keys in his hands. Meanwhile, closer to your home, the New York Jets, getting closer and closer to the Tuesday is the cut down day. Cuts are already starting to trickle in. But is there any news maybe on Hassan Reddick and the idea that after the stalemate, where there's been very little communication, if any at all, might he be coming back into camp?
Yeah, so obviously the Jets kind of wrapped up, quote unquote training camp, on Friday afternoon. They'll have a couple of more intense practices today and tomorrow, and then obviously make cuts from there. I think you should expect to see Reddick that Monday or Tuesday after Labor Day. So about a week from now, I think you should expect to see us on Reddick report. We'll see in terms of what happens in terms of a sweetener deal, in terms of those type of logistics. But I would expect from everything I understand that he should be there and he'll report week 1. He doesn't really have a choice, to be honest. This isn't like some breaking news. Like there's not really a choice. It seems like, frankly, on both sides of it, again, we talked a lot about this, and I'll keep it short and sweet. Both sides have not done the best here. And I think the Jets have made a couple of errors. I think both sides felt lied to, and there's maybe potentially some bad advice Reddick's gotten, I would say, and I'd use that kindly. I just think he's not gotten the best advice in terms of how to kind of handle this thing. Again, we'll see if he gets an extension. I'm sure it's more like this 1-year sweetener deal, but I expect Reddick to be in, at the facility probably in a week or so. And from there, we'll see. I don't know how much he plays week 1. My guess is maybe he plays 15 or 20 snaps at most. And then the next week, maybe it's ramped up to 30 or 40, and they'll finally kind of get humming, maybe the New England game, maybe the Denver game at home. But yeah, from a Reddick perspective, I think we're nearing the end here. But it's still not over. But I think we're getting close to him reporting. And, another guy, Jamar Chase, we talked a little bit about, finally practiced. It was a behind the closed doors practice, I guess, but finally practiced, I believe, was that Friday or Saturday, which is big news for the Bengals because most of these guys have not practiced yet. Trent Williams hasn't practiced. Ayuk hasn't practiced. CD hasn't practiced. I'm missing somebody else here. Reddick obviously hasn't practiced. Yeah. There's a lot of guys that have not practiced. Chase another being one of them. He finally reported, it looks like, in practice. Well, he's been reported, but finally practiced. Got to get in game shape. I don't know who. Right. I think Garofalo tweeted it. It's like at some level, there's kind of I think for me, it's Thursday. This upcoming Thursday is the make or break point, whether you can be full go for week 1 in terms of soft tissue stuff. Kind of getting closer finally to blank and get off the pot.
Yeah, it is crazy because I think automatically you just, he's practicing. Well, yeah, dude, we don't know that he's not going to pull a hamstring. You can run on your own, but it's an entirely different world when you put on the pads and you're running routes and stop and starting and doing all those things. You're getting pressed on by a defensive back, whatever it may be. And I think you've seen plenty of times where guys have protracted holdouts, and then when they come back, the hammy went or the quad went or the calf, and then it's a problem, not just for a week or two. It's a problem for half, if not most of the year. So that'll be something to certainly keep an eye on. You mentioned Zach Wilson. Sean Payton says his 3 quarterbacks, all of them, are making it. He obviously named Bo Nix the starter. That means Jarrett Stidham, I guess, would be the backup. But Zach had a very good camp, and it looks like Zach is going to, 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have bet on this. I would have said cut or practice squad at best. But now it feels like, unless Sean's full of you-know-what, that Zach's going to make the roster.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the possibility that they're kind of building him up a lot. That always makes me a bit leery and weary, or whatever the right term is.
Come call me for a trade.
come call me and let me get that 6th-round pick back. I just moved. Again, they don't even have half the salary now. So again, Zach became cheaper. Look, how do I phrase this nicely? I'm happy for Zach that he played well the last 2 weeks. It feels like he's gotten better each week. He's played less competition each week. It's, he's playing at the end of fourth quarters and preseason games. The end of the fourth quarter in a preseason game, specifically game 3, is usually 98% of those guys are getting cut. And it's not disrespectful. It's just the harsh reality of the NFL. Zach's played better. The only thing I'll caveat that with is this isn't new for Zach. Zach was pretty damn good in the preseason last year as well for the Jets. Mm-hmm. And it gets into real games. The coverages get mixed up. He starts seeing a lot of blitzes, starts seeing a lot of pressure. The game speeds up for him. Maybe Sean's able to rectify his athletic ability. The one clip that goes viral last night, the touchdown throw down the right sideline, any safety of any quality is either putting someone in a hospital for that ball or is picking it off with ease. It's a nice ball. Zach had the arm strength to get it there, and that's never been the question with Zach in terms of that twitchy arm. I just would say, to me, that's not a reason why he'll be good. I think we had to see it, and I don't see him playing that much this year. So, again, good for him. If he can establish himself as a backup in this league, that's awesome, and that's kind of what you see. Guy Sam Darnold, it's another Jets guy who established himself as a quality backup in the league, and will be a starter this year, obviously. But wouldn't make too much of Zach until we see it over a elongated time. We've seen the 1 week high, the 5 weeks low, the 1 week high, the 5 weeks low. So, yeah, I wouldn't overreact too much to a preseason game, especially with who he was going against. And we know a big thing with these quarterbacks, and this is what I guess I would caution with Drake Maye and Caleb and Jay Daniels and all these guys who've looked good. They all have looked good. Aaron Rodgers said a lot this offseason. The preseason, it's not just that it's not real football from a who's on the field. It's more importantly, scheme-wise, it is as basic as it gets. And frankly, if you can't run and throw a ball against cover 2 or cover 3 at this point in the NFL, you're not going to be able to figure out simulated pressures and, whatever. So I just want to caution that we're happy for him, but let's back up with he'd be a starter on 10 teams. I saw a lot of that today. Let's relax, buddy.
Yeah,
nobody wanted him 5 months ago.
Yeah, Sam Ehlinger looks awesome in the preseason every year for the last 3, and then when it gets to game time, it's different. As you mentioned, there's all these things happening, and I'm glad you brought up the thing about how advanced it is, because just from a Drake Maye standpoint, I should have made this point when we were talking earlier. He's done this against 2s and 3s. Hasn't played against the 1s. I think Philly played 2 starters in one series that he was in that preseason game in week 2, and Washington basically had, not only did they have half their entire first team down, but they had some of their second team guys not playing as well. So, again, you can only play who's in front of you, but when we're talking about, oh my God, he's awesome, and you got it, no, it's good. It's good signs. It's good that he's having positive moments as opposed to, going in the other direction. But again, you have to weigh the competition, and the competition right now isn't any good. Let's jump ahead, because we promised everybody, let's do the AFC North preview. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come right back with that. And we'll start with maybe the bottom of the division and work our way up. All right, you've heard me say this a bunch of times before. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000. Who wouldn't want to turn 10 into 1,000? I could use 1,000 or 2 or 3, 2 colleges. That's a lot to pay for. Sign up today, get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Will, you've done this before, right? You've had players picks. If you're sitting there, baseball, your guy Aaron Judge has been on fire. Would you just be laying odds on him, picks on him to do well?
Yeah, I ride the hot hand of Soto, Judge, and Stan right now. They're cooking. We got WNBA, WNBA final, stretches here. Caitlin Clark seemingly getting the handle of it. Asia Wilson, Angel Reese seemingly goes, not the best field goal percentage, but usually he's getting a lot of rebounds, double queen there. So a lot of different stuff. Obviously, we got tennis, soccer. There's a we're
whatever you're
entering whatever.
into.
Yeah, we are heading
College,
into
college football.
prime territory here. September, October, no better place to be to kind of go into Prize Picks, man. Use the app, and as Michael tell you.
Yeah, download the Prize Pick app today. Use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Pick, run your game. So I'm fired up to talk about the AFC North, and I think there are three teams that conceivably, if things went right, could actually win the division. And then there's one that I don't think has a snowball's chance in hell, and they've been probably the most consistent program, or one of them, over the last however many years, in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh was 10-7 last year, 9th in DVOA, 15th on offense, 6th in defense. And then they swapped out their quarterback position. They went from Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, who actually gave him a spark down the stretch last year, to Russell Wilson on the cheap and Justin Fields on the cheap. Everybody thought this was a quarterback competition, but clearly Mike Tomlin had the odds stacked in Russell Wilson's favor, and even though he missed a ton of time, it appears he's going to be the starting quarterback. And I would say it's like picking between two evils, and I don't know, I don't like either one of them. So, I probably would have gone with Fields here just because of the playmaking and the running, especially behind that porous offensive line, but it looks like Russell's the guy, and he's got a big salad fork sticking out of his back. I think he's all done.
Yeah. Man, I texted with somebody in the NFL about this last week, I guess, watching during that Fields kind of Russell Wilson battle and stuff. And I just said, they just feel like a team that the floor is still quite high because of Tomlin, because of this defense, because they do have some playmakers. The ceiling is also quite low. And I don't like last year, the Steelers were kind of the same team they are this year. Maybe they'll stay a little healthier with the Hayward and Minka and stuff, and TJ Watt and all those guys are like still really good. And I do think Minka and Hayward specifically are maybe getting closer to not being quite as elite, as elite as they used to be. I still think TJ Watt's one of the 5, 6, 7 best players in the AFC, whatever it may be. I don't know. Kyle Brandt talked about this on Bill Simmons' pod, and I want to give Kyle credit because love Kyle and he's a friend of the show, but also because it made a lot of sense. Mike Tomlin's like the most well-liked dude in the league. He's awesome, well-respected by everybody. He's fantastic at getting this team to never bottom out. But at some point, are they going to win a playoff game?
Right.
Here, are they going to be a team that actually is a legitimate contender that you feel good about? I wonder to myself sometimes, what's the plan here? This is a team that's all about championships and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that I'm asking them to be for Super Bowl this year. At some level, I feel like it's every year they're one and done in the playoffs. Oh, they just missed, but they're 9-8. They're 10-7. They make it. They're not very good. They get smoked in the wild card game. Even going back to the AB Lev Bell teams where did some bad playoff losses, or they go into New England every time and then get killed. And at some point, I feel like, does it grow stale at any point? I know you got the extension. I feel like there was a lot of buzz around Tomlin this offseason. You just wonder, I don't know, the quarterback situation is not going to help him. It feels like they get everything right, but quarterback, offensive line, and offensive coordinator since Big Ben and things like that, and Haley and those guys moved on, and Bruce. I just wonder. This team is just very confusing to me. I don't know how to quite figure them out, because I genuinely feel like if you told me they won 9 games, I'd probably be what I'd picked them to win, because I think the defense helps them out. Tomlin gets them there. Russ will have a few moments. Fields will have a few moments. They'll beat up on the bad teams, etc. But if you told me they won 11 games, I'd tell you you're crazy, And I just the ceiling feels so low with this team that any good team's going to go in there and say, you're not running the football on us. You are going to have to beat us through the air 40 times, and we're going to kill the clock, and we're going to go outside after Joey Porter and try to get him, nice player, fun player. We're going to try to get him for 2 or 3 holding calls. We're going to run at TJ Watt 20 times and try to wear him down throughout the game and hope that we can't, we eliminate him, we'll double him, and we'll figure it out. I don't know. I just remember the Jets went in there 2 years ago to Pittsburgh, and an eerily similar team, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. They've added some places. They've gotten older some places, as we mentioned. And it was just hey, Kenny Pickett, we're going to make Kenny Pickett throw the football. And Kenny Pickett threw a bunch of picks. Yeah. And the offensive line's bad. That's the whole thing we're not talking about. We talk about Russ. Fields, the defense, etc. The offensive line has had injuries, and most importantly, they've looked really bad in the preseason, and that always scares me. Where like it doesn't get easier from here.
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you feel? Am I like being too harsh on them? I don't know. I have no like expectation outside of they're going to be go 9-8 or 8-9, and that's that.
Yeah, so they've gone 17 years without a losing record, which is, it's remarkable. But again, when was the last time they won a title? Was Tomlin's first year, I think. So 2009, something like that. It's been a long time. To rely on Russell and Justin Fields as your quarterback combo. I mean, I understand why they did it, but then I say to myself, well, what was the investment there? There is no investment. They gave up a late round pick for Fields. They're not paying him any money. Didn't pick up, they don't have to pick up his 5th-year option. Russell Wilson is essentially free. So let's see if we can, if Arthur Smith can fix this. And look, Arthur Smith is a better offensive coordinator than Matt Canada. Matt Canada, set that thing back multiple years, set offense, I think, back multiple years. But then there's also the part of Arthur Smith where he had pieces in Atlanta and they disappointed, right? And, obviously some of that was quarterback play and the decisions they made at quarterback. But you draft Bijan Robinson and then you only give him 10, 12 touches a game. Is he going to do the same thing here? Are you not going to feature Carl Pickens and Pat Freiermuth? Are you going to try to we throw to the guy who's open? We spread the ball around. Like, okay, but if Pickens is this much better than your next wide receiver, which I do believe he is, and I don't think he's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, I'm making sure I target him 10 times a game, at least, right? If I think Freiermuth's about to take a jump, and some people believe that, I'm getting him way more involved. I'm getting him 6, 8, 10 targets a game because he's my best tight end, and I want to run through the middle of the field, which, by the way, neither quarterback does very well. Russell or Justin doesn't see the middle of the field or doesn't like to throw the middle of the field. And then you mentioned the offensive line, which I think is an incredible point. These two guys hold the ball longer than any quarterbacks in the league, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Go look at their numbers in past years. They sit back there forever. Russell takes a ton of sacks. For years, you tried to blame it on the offensive line, and when people started to dig deeper into it, they're like, dude, you don't have 4 seconds to throw on every play. And Fields has always, sort of become that same thing where he doesn't see it well enough to get rid of it quick. So unless it's a quick design play, i.e. a wide receiver screen or something like that, he takes so long to process that now it's 3.5 seconds he's held the ball. And guess what? Even good offensive lines don't hold up for that long. Never mind what Pittsburgh's got going. So I don't see it. They added some nice pieces. Like I think Patrick Queen, and we'll see if he was a product of Roquan Smith and the Mike McDonald
CD
defense.
Lamb, breaking news. CD Lamb extension, 4 for 136.
Well, there you go. Smart. Now they got to get him up to speed and hope the hamstring holds up because same thing there. CD Lamb is so far and away their best wide receiver on that roster. Brandon Cooks is what he is, and he's kind of on the downside. There's been some Jalen Tolbert buzz, but yeah, they better hope that the hamstrings hold up there because he's an important piece. So anyway, Pittsburgh, we spent enough time on them. Let's move to Cleveland, who I would have in the 3 spot here. They were 11-6 last year, 8th in DVOA, 28th on offense, but 2nd on defense. The Jim Schwartz defense was phenomenal last year. And the first thing I write, and again, we do this a lot, the quarterback. Is Deshaun any good? Because it has been so freaking long since he was good. The last time Deshaun Watson was good, people, the last time Deshaun Watson played a full season, people, was the COVID year, which seems like an eternity ago. Kind of is an eternity ago in NFL, the framework of the NFL. It's been 3 years. I just don't know. I can't. I mean, in fact, I shouldn't say I just don't know. My leaning is he's not. My leaning is at best he's an average quarterback at this point. And if he's an average quarterback with what they're paying him and having the whole thing built around him, then that's not going to be good enough. And that team's not going to 11-6 last year, which let's not forget, 11-6 with 5 different quarterbacks last year, including Joe Flacco, who's now the backup in Indianapolis.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you hit on there. Just want to clarify on the CeeDee Lamb deal. Is the second it's the largest signing bonus ever given to a receiver, $38 million. And he's the second highest paid non-quarterback ever to Justin Jefferson. Jefferson got 4 for 140, Lamb at 4 for 136. There are 4 holdouts remaining, as we mentioned: Williams, Ayuk, Reddick, and Jamar Chase. In terms of the Browns, they're a prime candidate for a big-time regression. My only reason I don't think they will is because how good this defense is, and I actually think they could even get better. I just think another year under Jim Schwartz, do they stay healthy or a couple other places? My worry with the Browns is this: like, not only has the Watson piece not been good off the field, obviously, as we all know, on the field it just hasn't looked good like ever, and it kind of started to look good that one Ravens game, but then he ends up getting hurt anyways. He seems like he's just getting hurt a lot now too. It's not even just a matter of the actual physical play. He's a slower decision maker than he used to be. He doesn't look quite as athletic. The arm doesn't look. Everything just looks off. It hasn't even looked remotely the same. So to me, they're going to have to get Watson to play at least at, crazy as this sounds, at Flacco level to be what they were last year. And I just think they're maybe more of a 9-win team this year that like kind of gets by and maybe sneaks in to that 7 seed, and is really, you don't want to play them because maybe they'll get Chubb back eventually, even though we don't know what he really is. And Stefanski's a damn good coach, 2-time coach of the year. There's a lot there. There's a lot to like. Like Myles Garrett might win Defensive Player of the Year. Amari Cooper's probably going to go for 1,200, 1,300 yards. And there's a bunch of like the offensive line's still good, although they seem to always have these injuries. And I don't know, they pay JOK and Denzel Ward, and they're a really good team. They're really well built. There's a lot of things to like. The quarterback, is Deshaun Watson the 25th best quarterback in the league? He's the 20th best. Is he the 18th best? What is he? But his contract kind of ruined a lot of stuff for a lot of teams and a lot of players. And on top of that, it's just not a good contract, and it's only going to get worse. So they're kind of stuck, and I worry, do they get a regression because the quarterback play is just meh, and they win 9 games, they win 2 or 3, they don't win the Niners game they won last year in the rain where they get the missed field goal. They maybe don't steal one of those other ones. They don't steal the Jets against Trevor Siemian. Like, they don't have those two. Maybe they're a 9-win team this year. They'll be good. They'll be not fun to watch. They'll be hard to play against. I just feel like the Browns and the Steelers are both in that, like, don't really want to play them, but also not super scared of playing them. I don't know. It's a weird mix.
I report on this at the time because Alex Van Pelt was their offensive coordinator last year. Van Pelt, now the Patriots offensive coordinator, obviously did not call plays in Cleveland. That's Kevin Stefanski's his job there, even though he's the head coach. They talked about the idea that they thought their drop back pass game was a little stale, and it doesn't feel like Stefanski wanted to make that move. That feels like that decision came above him, and I'm just curious if this isn't just sort of the last gasp attempt to save Watson and the investment they put in Watson. And then even though Kevin Stefanski is the reigning NFL Coach of the Year and the 2-time NFL Coach of the Year in his short tenure in Cleveland, if he doesn't become it's got to be you. So it can't be the quarterback that we're paying, we guaranteed $250 million to. We got to blame somebody, and we got to blame the coach in that case, even if the coach has the resume that Stefanski has. Although, again, like, win some playoff games, and obviously they got curb stomped in the playoffs last year, and look, the Joe Flacco magic bus ran off the road in that game. But also, Schwartz didn't do a very good job adjusting to what Houston did, and that sometimes I think Schwartz is he likes to dial up a lot of different things, but I think he also gets stubborn and does this is what worked, so we're going to keep doing it. And then when some team figures it out, he's got to be able to make the adjustment. He's been around the league long enough, and he certainly didn't do that last year. All right, let's move on to could have been a toss-up, but I think based on some of the stuff that's happened to them in the offseason, some of the things that they've been dealing with, I have Cincy as my number 2 team in the division. They were 11th in DVOA last year, even though Joe Burrow basically missed a good portion of the season. 11th offensively with Jake Browning as their quarterback, 23rd defensively, which is a big surprise with the Lou Anarumo defense. But they're back, and there's some good buzz about them. You just mentioned the Jamar Chase thing, finally practicing this weekend, even though he doesn't have his new contract that he wants. And yet another team where I come back to the quarterback and Joe Burrow, and there's no questioning, unlike Deshaun Watson, there's no questioning that Joe Burrow is good. He's an elite quarterback. But he has a wrist injury that, I don't think any NFL quarterback has ever had. And it's a stretch the entire summer and the spring and summer where they weren't letting him throw more than 2 or 3 days in a row. And while they're saying he's healthy, it's a weird injury. It's an injury that I'm very leery of because there is no real history for an NFL quarterback to come back from something like this. And I wonder, like, is he going to be the same guy? Last year it was a different injury, right? It was the calf that got him off to the slow start. He wasn't himself until week 4 or 5, finally turns into Joe Burrow again. And then like a week later, that's when the wrist thing happens. And, Zach Taylor and then offensive coordinator Brian Callahan did a great job of sort of drawing up a new offense with Jake Browning. But it's clear, they're going back to what Burrow loves to do. Should have Chase in there for week 1. They've got T. Higgins on the franchise deal, which it's nice that he's there. I will say that's another thing that I always raise my eyebrows at. Like, oh, let's say we're a middling team. He's got a hamstring or a quad or a calf. And he says, you know what? I can't play this week. I can't, because I got a payday that I'm looking forward to in the offseason that's not going to come from you guys likely. So I got to protect myself, and I'm the asset here. So I just wonder how that'll play. But by and large, I still have a hard time betting against Burrow. I still have a hard time betting against Lou Anarumo. I feel like they've reworked that defense again to give him a little bit more confidence in some of the back end guys, especially at safety. And I just feel like they'll be a bitch to play all year.
Yeah, and it's they're an interesting one. I think you can make the case they're the biggest threat to Kansas City in some senses, and I think you could make the case they're a little lighter than they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that like couple-year window where they didn't have to pay anybody and they could kind of really stack up around them. Yeah. I like the Amarius Mims pick. I think the offensive line should be good. Like I mean, again, I don't know if it'll be elite, but it should be good. Mims just looked awesome. He's an absolute unicorn. They even have, Big Trent Brown and Mims and Orlando Brown on the same offensive line. It's pretty hilarious from a pure mass perspective. Yes. They bring in Gesicki. We'll see. Drew Sample's shown some nice things. I think the tight end spot for them is kind of by rotation. Zach Moss show, a little bit more now. Obviously, Joe Mixon, they kind of let go. Andre Yoshivas will play a big role. Princeton guy. They have. We'll see if Cole Burgess makes the roster. I don't know. My Cortland guy, but Dan Pitcher comes in. Obviously, as the offensive coordinator, he's been a guy who's been responsible for a lot of their third down stuff, a lot of their goal line stuff, and helping develop Burrow. Not that he needed to do that much to help Burrow, but he did enough. Obviously, they lose Callahan in Tennessee, so I think the Bengals will be good. I think they finish second in the division unless Burrow kind of returns to peak form Burrow. I just wonder sometimes, like, does it take them a little while to get going? Just Chase and Higgins, if they don't get the new deals and have to play, are they super motivated or are they kind of like a little checked out? I think those guys love ball and like, I don't doubt that. I just sometimes wonder, football's a mental sport. You have to make
business decisions. You have to.
Yeah.
Like I got big money coming to me from somebody. If it's not going to be from you, like, why am I going to lay it out on the line? Because let's face it, especially if it's Jamar, which, they have franchise Jamar, they'll do all these things if they have to. But like T. Higgins is probably going to be the best wide receiver on the market in the offseason. We just saw Calvin Ridley get $50 million essentially for 2 years guaranteed from Tennessee. Like, T. Higgins is a better receiver than Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, like I said, I think Sheldon Rankins will be a really nice addition. I think the defensive line is really good. Miles Murphy, obviously, as well. Could they bring Chris Jenkins in? Like, there's a lot there to like. A lot. I think they're probably a 10 or 11 win team. Like, I feel pretty good about, again, their ceiling's really damn high. When you have a guy like Jamar Chase, and you have a guy like Joe Burrow, you have a coach that's taking you to a Super Bowl, and you have a good defense and a good defensive coordinator, like, they're in a good spot. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I kind of almost have to re-see it again because I feel like it's a little bit of that. In the regular season, they kind of are a team that does go up and down a bit. They play up really well to these big games. I feel like every year it's like the Buffalo game, Kansas City. Obviously there's other games, but those are those games. I feel like they're always locked in, ready to go. The Ravens games, especially too. I feel like they're maybe a little worse than Baltimore, who we'll talk about in a moment, who lost a lot of guys. But like I said, you trust Burrow in a big spot. You trust Chase to show up. And I feel like they're a team that's probably the 5 seed. That's probably where I'm going to end up landing on them. They're probably like an 11-win team that's the 5 seed. And everyone's going, all right, they'll beat the AFC South team or whoever that team is. and no one wants to see them round 2, and they'll go back to Kansas City or go back to Buffalo, wherever it is, and we'll get Allen versus Burrow or Burrow versus Mahomes part 3 or 4, and that's kind of how I see things rolling. Kind of rolling.
Will, you love in the summertime. I know you. You love to go to Yankees games. I'm not going to hold it against you. It's a nice park. The team I can live without, but whatever. You're that guy. Who do you use? Do you use anybody in particular when you need your tickets and you want to find that best seat? Maybe the day of. You're like, oh man, I got time. I'm going to go to a game tonight. It's beautiful out. Me and the girl, we're going to go to the game.
Game Time app. It's incredibly easy to use, incredibly efficient. You find some of the best seats and some of the best deals, on the market for whether you're going to Yankees, Red Sox, or any type of sport.
Yeah, it's funny. My daughter keeps saying, when are we going to a game? When are we going to a game? I'm like, well, let me get the app. We put the app, we go, bam, we're done. It's so simple. It's so easy. The interface is just fantastic. You want to use that. GameTime.co. Last minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you need. Game Time's got it.
Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets this season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention DJ Reader, who left in free agency for the Lions. They'll miss him, remiss and miss. They're going to miss Reader, even though I know he had some injury problems. You mentioned Rankins, Chris Jenkins, a little bit different body types. Reader is just a monster in the middle. Like if Reader is healthy, and I know he just came off PUP for Detroit, he'll make a huge difference on their front, which is already pretty good to begin with. But Reader is an important guy. And when I talked about the back end, they were so good with Bates and Von Bell for those years that you talked about, that 2 years where they were really, you're in the Super Bowl, you're pushing the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, losing in overtime. Bell left in free agency. Well, he got cut. He's back. They brought him back. There's comfort in that. He's not like a game-changing player, but he's a smart player. Obviously, Anarumo loves him, trusts him. And then they brought in Geno Stone in free agency from Baltimore. He's not Bates, although he had big ball production numbers last year. But based on what they had there last year, the transition to these two guys, if they get good football from them, which they, both of those guys should give them good football, they should be a lot better on the back end, and that will make such a difference for Anarumo up front as he dials up all kinds of stuff. By the way, Miles Murphy, knee injury, 4 to 6 weeks, they say. Looked like it could have been horrible, so that's actually good news. Hendrickson, who still doesn't like his contract, he's there, and Sam Hubbard as well. So they'll need good edge play to help that defense get back to where they were in prior years. And then that leaves us to Baltimore, who was the best team in football last year until the playoffs. And when you look back at that playoff game, if Zay Flowers just holds on to the football, that doesn't fumble the football, do they win that game? If Lamar doesn't throw the pick in the end zone, do they win that game? But these are things that happened, and they're 13-4 year, the number 1 in DVOA, 4th on offense, 1st in defense, 3rd in special teams, ends up going for naught in the postseason, and therefore Lamar's still got to answer the questions like, well, can you get it done in the postseason? And the answer thus far has been no, despite his second MVP last year. I just got to believe, though, even with all the personnel losses, that in a second year in this system for Lamar, last year was Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator. There was comfort there, but it wasn't to the degree that it should be now. I feel like he's going to be a monster again this year. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's going for back-to-back MVPs, because I feel like this suits him so well. It's interesting, too, because he dropped a lot of weight, right? He said he looked fat, which is ridiculous. The guy is jacked, but he didn't like the way he felt. He felt a little sluggish, he said. And so he's back down to 205-ish, which, that was reversed. Everyone says he's got to build himself up to take the punishment. And now he's saying, well, I did that, and he won MVPs, but I want to go back in the other direction because I want to be explosive. And there were plenty of times last year where he said, I looked at the tape, and if I had been a little lighter, that 5-yard run, that 8-yard run would have been an 80-yard run. That's how he felt. And so I'm curious to see that part of it too.
Yeah, the Ravens are an interesting one again. I feel like I keep saying that they're interesting, but you know what? Until they get into the playoffs and they start taking care of business and get to that title, get to a Super Bowl at least, there's going to be questions. I think there's fair questions, and I think about Lamar in the playoffs, and I think there's
Sure.
fair questions from maybe from a Harbaugh perspective. Those guys that like so dominant in camp, so dominant in the preseason, so dominant in the regular season, and then we just don't see it quite as much again. Does Zay Flowers not fumble that ball, and we're looking at a different game? There's a million other things happen, but this isn't a 1 year situation, right? And they were awesome and all those different things. So I look at them. The offensive line to me is a question. They lost a lot of guys, and Roger Rosengarten's looked really good in the preseason, and Andrew Voorhees, the guy I liked a lot in college. He obviously the injury. Tyler Linderbaum's the guy that everyone loved coming out, continues to like. Defensively, the personnel is awesome, no doubt about it. They bring, obviously what Roquan's brought to that team has been amazing. That
Kyle
said,
Hamilton, one of the greatest pieces in football.
Yeah, Kyle Hamilton's been amazing, and another season of Marcus Williams, and Marlon Humphrey, and they bring in Nate Wiggins. They bring in like a lot of Devontae Walker's a guy that I think a lot of people liked in the draft process. They're a team that's unfortunately in a situation I think somewhat similar to Miami and Buffalo in the AFC, where you go, okay, we've seen the regular season. Like, we know what you were about. We understand you can light up the scoreboard, and Allen and Lamar specifically will be in the MVP conversation all year long. And Harbaugh and McDermott will be in the coach of the year conversation all year long. And to some extent, McDaniels and Tua, and it's great. But at the end of the day, judged on winning titles in this league, and Lamar's done every single thing you could do. And it's fair or not, it's just a reality. We do it for other guys. We talk about Aaron Rodgers like he's the worst postseason quarterback ever, and he's got 11 playoff wins and a title and an MVP in the Super Bowl. And we talk about some of these other guys, Burrow, Lamar, Allen, and we're like, oh my God, they're so like Rodgers needs a title. And it's like, well, he has a title actually, and these other guys don't have a title. And frankly, like only one of them's gotten to a Super Bowl. So I just think the Ravens come down to, what are you going to do for me in January? Because I know what they're going to be September through January. They're going to be damn good. They're going to be damn hard to beat. Let's see. I think they win this division. I don't think they're quite as good as they were last year, but maybe it works in their advantage. They're a different team. Again, the coordinator situation is the one for them. We saw this with Philly last year. Harbaugh's a much better coach than Sirianni. I'm not saying that. But generally speaking, when you lose both coordinators, what are you going to be? It takes some time. Sometimes takes a little while to get rolling here and some new pieces. I'm just curious. I think they'll be their best team version week 6 through 18. Week 1 through 6, they'll be good. They'll be hard to beat. I don't know if they'll be peak them, but I think they'll get rolling. I think they win this division. They probably win 12 games, and their team you probably don't want to play in the playoffs. Although, again, until they get it done, I guess maybe you do. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they had probably the 3 best regular season wins last year. They smacked Detroit when Detroit was playing well. They smacked Miami when Miami was rolling, and they beat the 49ers as well. It was just like they were the team last year, and even as poorly as they played in the playoff game against KC, they were still within a whisker of winning that game. So, yeah, Mike McDonald being gone as the defensive coordinator, we know how good he was. Nose tackles and coverage, safeties, blitzing, simulated pressures everywhere. Zach Orr's a young guy. Didn't think this was going to be his route necessarily, and here he is as a young DC. Might take a little bit, as you mentioned, but there's enough pieces in place where they should be rocking and rolling sooner rather than later. And again, we'll see what happens in January, because they're going to be there in January. The question is, can they win in January? And that hasn't happened in some time. Let's switch over now to the NFC North. And we didn't talk about this in advance. I kind of like springing this on you. But I would think, I'm going to read your brain here, Minnesota's the 4th team in this division, correct? Ooh.
Yeah. But I think
who would be 4th if it wasn't Minnesota? Chicago?
I'm getting a little. Let's start with the Bears, because I think they're the one that I'm confused on, because everything tells me Sheil Kapadia was on. I don't remember what show he was on recently, and he did his whole study. I think he wrote this in the Ringer. Rookie quarterbacks drafted in the first round as a rookie. There's exceptions. CJ Stroud was obviously an exception, and Baker Mayfield, frankly, was an exception. They usually are ranked on average the 26th quarterback that year in the league. I say that because I'm probably the biggest Caleb Williams guy you'll meet.
I can attest to this.
Yeah, but I'm a little worried that we're doing this. CJ Stroud did it last year, so Caleb has to do it this year. And they're going to go win 12 games, and this defense is amazing, and the weapons are amazing. And Caleb's amazing. Like, yes, I think all those things could be true. But I'm a little worried from the aspect of, are we sure Matt Eberflus is a really good coach, or are we sure are we sure that he's a guy that doesn't have you bottom out? He kind of saved himself in the locker room a little bit, and the defense got better. After the Montez Sweat, like, who's rushing the passer? Because all I hear is how good this defense is, and I agree they're good. But like the NFL, you got to get home with pressure, and if you're going to sit back there and play cover 2 shell and say like we're going to bait you, that's great. But like Montez Sweat isn't like prime Myles Garrett. He's a good player, and I don't know. I just have these weird questions where I feel like we're just assuming everything is going to go right. And realistically, if the Bears go win 7 games and Caleb looks really good for a large portion of the year, it's a damn good year. And they're probably going, okay, are we sure we don't want to go hire Bill Belichick now that we have a quarterback and say, like, I don't know, we'll give him power and sorry, we'll go win this division for the next 3 years. My point is, like, I just am a little worried that we're just assuming Kevin O'Connell's a much better coach than Matt Eberflus, in my opinion. And we're like assuming the Vikings are just going to suck. And we're assuming the Bears are just going to be good because they've added pieces. Like, I got to just see it first before we jump to like, hey, back half of last year, the defense was really good, but they still didn't get any pressure. They were like 28th in pressure, 29th in pressure, even though they just paid a guy $25 million. I sound like I'm being negative. There's a world in which the Bears make the playoffs, 1,000%, that they take that. They're 9 or 10 win team, and Caleb's great, and the defense is good, and these talented receivers and everything. I just feel like we're doing everyone saying that, and it gives me these radars and antennas to go, are we sure they're not a 7-win team?
Right.
Like, are you positive?
They were a 7-win team last year. They made a big jump, as you mentioned, second half of last season. They were second in DVOA from week 10 on defensively. I love their secondary. I think Jalen Johnson, who got paid, is a stud. Jaquan Brisker, safety from Penn State. Loved him coming out. Good player. Kyler Gordon, corner from Washington a couple of years ago. Good player. Their linebacking group, like I think when we talk about off-the-ball linebackers, there aren't a lot of good ones, or there aren't a lot of good groups, if you will. I think they have a good one. Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, Jack Sanborn. But to your point about the pass rush, they were in on Matthew Judon. They had a deal.
They were in on Bryce Hall.
They wanted to get the extension with Judon. Or Atlanta said, we'll roll the dice and work something out when he gets here. They said, we're not making a trade for a 3rd-round pick unless we get his name on a contract beyond this year. And that's why he ends up in Atlanta and not Chicago. So they know that it's a problem. Austin Booker has been really good for them in the preseason. I love Booker. Coming out of University of Kansas, he, to me, was the best pass rusher in the draft from the edge. Doesn't have a lot of reps. I think he played 500 college snaps. So, like, he's got a long way to go in his development. He could be a stud down the line, but it might be a little too early for prime time to be that guy for 17 weeks opposite Montez Sweat. So I think the defense will be good, but that's going to be a problem for them getting to the quarterback. And then offensively, you mentioned the Caleb Williams. There's been some weird Keenan Allen stuff. Like, I think we talked, is he fat? There's the whole thing. Like, it's weird because he's always been such a good pro. Like, I said, yeah, I can't tell, unless I'm standing next to the guy, it's really hard to tell. But there has been some talk about that. And then I do wonder, Shane Waldron comes over from Seattle. He's the OC. What's Shane Waldron do? Like, we don't know that. I just don't know that we know that Shane Waldron isn't someone that we say is cutting edge. Like, people got all like hot and bothered about Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson. And those guys, if they have good years again this year, are going to be head coaches. In fact, I think Ben Johnson, unless it's a disaster, is going to be a head coach, assuming he wants to lead Detroit. But, like, no one's ever said that about Shane Waldron. So we'll see. We'll see if he's got the answers, if he and Caleb can be on the same page, if they can feed multiple targets, because DJ Moore thinks he's the number 1 receiver. Keenan still thinks he's the number 1 receiver. Roma Dunze, there's already been some good chemistry with him and Caleb Williams. So, like, does he vault ahead of one of those guys, and how does that go? Cole Kmet, obviously, they paid him a lot of money. He wants some targets. So there's a lot of talent on that team, but I don't know that I can fully see it coming together. But this takes me to Minnesota, where I felt like this was a step back year for them, drafting being okay with letting Kirk go for that number. Drafting JJ, who obviously has some good skills, but is a little bit raw. And they were going to develop him, and I think Kevin O'Connell was the right guy to do that. But for have him get the injury and now be cost for the season, I think we all kind of thought like Darnold will start, but at some point JJ will be the quarterback. And now it's Darnold, sink or swim, right? We know what Nick Mullins is. He might give you a game, and then he'll resort to throwing, 4 interceptions rather. Jaron Hall, developmental guy, like they couldn't roll with him last year. They had to bring in Josh Dobbs. So I feel like there's a talent deficiency at quarterback that Kirk was able to raise their floor, if again, not raise their ceiling. Like they were always kind of that same 9-10 win team. Like Sam could be bad. I know he could be bad because he's been bad in other spots. So like if he's bad and you have nowhere else to turn, then I don't care if you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson coming back off the knee, whenever that is, like you're not going to be good. Because if he stinks, you just can't get around that. So that worries me. They obviously, defensively, Brian put a lot of stuff on tape. They do crazy stuff. They blitz you when you come off the bus. Teams have had a year to kind of sit on that now. You can marinate. Do teams have a better answer for some of the stuff that he did for them last year? And what's his counter to that? Because obviously we're not going to see that in the summer, as you mentioned. It's not that for Brian, it's never bland, but it's bland in the sense of what he does normally during the regular season. So I could see them being a 5-win team, even though I think Flores is a really good defensive coordinator, even though I think Kevin O'Connell is a really good offensive mind. Like I just could see the quarterback position and maybe some regression defensively sort of taking them back to that spot. And then what's the ceiling? If they're really good, is the ceiling 8 wins? Like I just don't. I know they signed Gilmore, so they kind of feel like maybe they think they're still part of it, but I don't know. The more I sit on it, the more I look at the roster, the more I think that it's a nice thought. I appreciate you investing in the roster and signing Gilmore, but I just don't think that's going to be enough to help you be anything other than a last place team.
Yeah, it comes down to me. Like I still think the Bears finished 3rd, but I just don't think it's like far and away that Minnesota is so much worse than them. I think that O'Connell's really good. Like I might be higher on him than anybody. I don't know. I just like.
No, I like him. I like him a lot.
If you told me the Jets head coach was Kevin O'Connell, I'd probably pick them. I think people would be picking them to win division, no problem. Like I truly think that. The one thing that's weird with Minnesota is I felt like they waited a year longer than they should have to try to blow it up. I felt like last year was the time to do it. There's a huge stacked quarterback class. They got a quarterback. They clearly wanted Michael Penix. If you believe all the reporting, maybe they would have gotten a Drake Maye, maybe who obviously the O'Connell and McCown and the whole, I don't know, that whole situation. I think Sam will be better than people are expecting, but I don't think they're more than probably a 7 or 8 win team. I think they're probably like 7 and 10 and they have some moments where they're really frisky and they beat Green Bay, or they'll beat the Jets, or they'll beat the Lions, or they'll have this one stretch, or they'll beat Buffalo, or whatever. Who knows what it's going to be? If whatever the one of that game, like, I guess the Jets are like the opposite game, but whatever it is, they'll go beat Green Bay, and we'll be like, ooh, like the Vikings, the frisky like 7 seed. I think they just fall short at the end of the day. I think they made some nice additions, like Cashman, Van Ginkel, we mentioned Gilmore. Give Brian a lot more talent, on that side of the football. They still lost to Neil Hunter. Like, what do you have? 17 sacks last year, 18 sacks. Like, it's not as if it's not as if like they, again, it's nice. Andrew Van Ginkel's a nice player. I'm not poo-pooing that. I just, okay, Dallas Turner, what's he going to be? They're a bit confused when they signed Aaron Jones, obviously. What's he got left in the tank? He's a guy that I feel like still has a lot of juice, but has kind of got the hamstring stuff that kind of seems to pop up quite a bit. I feel like they're a 7 or 8 win team. I feel like Chicago's probably an 8 or 9 win team, but could easily be it feels like Chicago's 7 to 9 wins. Minnesota's like 5 to 9 wins. The floor and the ceiling are just a bit too all over the place for me. And I don't know that Minnesota's like primed and ready to like physically beat Detroit up, or Green Bay for that matter. Maybe they are. I don't know. Ivan Pace is a guy who's looked better. What's Harrison Smith got left? Like, yeah, Caleb Evans and Shaq Griffin ops. I don't know. I just think they'll be fun. They'll frisky. I just don't know that they'll be good. I guess the best way I could say it.
I just, I think Sam has been in a lot of places and people have tried to rebuild him, and maybe this is his time to be Geno Smith, in Seattle a few years ago. Because I think it is in some ways a good offensive line, right? Excellent tackles. You've got weapons. If Aaron's healthy, you've got a running game. But to your point, I have to see it to believe it, and I haven't seen it from him in a long time. I'm not buying stock in that until it actually happens. All right, so now this would be the point of the conversation where you say, can you make a case for Green Bay to unseat Detroit? Detroit is one of the favorites to go to the Super Bowl, one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl. Green Bay was 9-8 last year, but obviously incredibly frisky in the second half of the season. Played well in the postseason. Jordan Love with the bad interception. Otherwise, whatever, the last 9-10 games of his season convinced Green Bay that he deserved to be paid a crap ton of money, which they did this offseason. Can you envision a scenario, health excluded, where Green Bay is better than Detroit?
Yeah, I can envision a scenario. My questions with Green Bay are, they are the team that I feel like everybody's picking to be that team. And I guess the case would be they feel a little 2010 Jetsy, where 2009 was like way too early for them in a sense. And they're like, hey man, like they don't fall apart in the second half. Very similar to what the Jets did against the Colts that year. Got some injuries. We fell apart in the second half a little bit. But like should have beaten San Francisco. We should have been the team in the Super Bowl a year early. And now we'll get a healthy Christian Watson, another year of Jordan Love. We'll get healthier. We'll be better and all that stuff. And like, why can't we go beat San Francisco this time? And then we take the Lions down or whoever it is. So I get it. And I think Love is a guy that was really damn good the back half of the year. Like, he was insane. Like he just was. That Cowboys game is incredible, and it's harder to play better. I think a lot of the talent and offense, you could argue, is better this year just from a year of experience. You like the tight end room, the receiver room. Don't love. I think people are really high on their receiver room, and I think it's good. I don't know that they have a special player in there. Not that you need one. We've seen that. Right. You don't need it. Is Josh Jacobs what is Josh Jacobs? Because 2 years ago he won the rushing title, and last year obviously didn't practice until the season started and looked pretty average, if not bad.
Right.
My question's on defense, and you're up in the New England area. Did anyone like Jeff Hafley as a defensive coordinator like 6 months ago? Because I felt like that kind of came out of nowhere, and I think there was like 2 seconds where there was the Robert Saleh hit piece by The Athletic, and it was like, is Saleh going to get fired and go be the Packers DC, and they're going to hire Mike Vrabel? And that was a fun conversation for 3 minutes. But in seriousness, like, I think the Packers defense was not good last year, and they have 7 first-round picks and all this different stuff and this talent, but like the defense hasn't been good in forever. And Jeff Hafley, like, I don't know that he gives you confidence that all of a sudden you're going to bring in a Brian Flores, one of the Spagnuolo type that's going to come in and be like, hey man, we're going to get like max Anarumo, max effort and max energy out of this group. And they're going to go from 23 to 5. And that with Love, like 14 wins, like maybe, but do you see that? I don't know if I see that. I see more like 10 wins, and they're frisky and good and talented.
Yeah. The Hafley thing surprised the hell out of me. Look, it's not easy to win at Boston College. Generally BC will have, let's say, one really good year in a 10 to 12-year period. Matt Ryan, they were number 2 in the country and lost to Virginia Tech late in the year, ending those hopes. They've had some moments, right? Like, forget about the Flutie. That's a million years ago. But like, they've had some moments. Their defense wasn't good the last 2 years, in particular under Hafley. I think 88th and 100th in FCS, which that's not good. He's obviously got more talent. He's obviously got more talent to work with, as you mentioned, the 7 first-round picks, and Barry did I think kind of a terrible job in Green Bay. Like, I don't know how you couldn't carve more out of that. He didn't. Can Halfley do it? He, just based on the sheer talent, you should be able to, but we haven't seen him. I don't know that he can put together a good defense. I know that the edge guys are all excited. Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness are all like, hey, like we're not dropping into coverage anymore. Like, hand in the dirt, edge support, and go get the quarterback. That's what he's telling us to do. So maybe that unlocks those guys, and maybe Gary's a double-digit sack guy. Maybe Smith's, maybe they have that. Van Ness was very productive last year as a pass rusher, so maybe that takes him to another place. He should create more one-on-ones inside for Frank Clark, Devontae Wyatt. Again, really talented guys. So, like, can that defensive line sort of control things? You added good pieces in the back. I think Javon Bullard, the kid out of Georgia, he's going to play a lot for them at safety, nickel, whatever. And obviously they give a crap ton of money to Xavier McKinney, who I think he's an excellent player. And they're going to ask him to do a lot there. And that was a problem for them last season. So pieces are in place.
Yeah, what's Jair Alexander at this point?
Right.
That's a key to me. Like you mentioned Gary. Jair's the highest paid corner in the league still. And we've seen other guys get paid after him. And that AJ Terrell deal, I know we didn't mention earlier, not great for the cornerback market. I think Surtain and Sauce will do probably $3-4 million a year more. Good by Atlanta to get him locked up. I think he's definitely in a tier below those guys. The Jair one, I think, I just find it so intriguing because there's a lot of weird stuff last year. The interview that he did, whatever, that was odd, and then he went out for the coin toss. And whatever, right? That was really weird. He got suspended, and he didn't look very good. But he 2 years ago, I felt like. I don't know. It's probably the hardest game Garrett Wilson's ever played. It was his second or fourth game in the NFL, and I was like, oh wow, Jair's still that dude, and he's at moments. But if Jair Alexander's awesome and back to being him, this defense is going to just be infinitely better. I don't know how to. There's not a lot of elite corners, and he's one of them. But I don't know if he's still elite, and I think that's a big if for me. Halfley's job will look a lot easier if you get 2 years ago Jair and 2 years ago Rashawn Gary, while having a much different conference. 3 years ago Rashawn Gary and Alexander having a much. But are those guys still in there? Injuries. There's a lot of injuries, a lot of money, just something to consider. I think the Packers could be awesome. I don't think they're lower than a 9 or 10 win team, but they could be as high as a 13 win team. If Jordan Love plays like he did even mildly at the end of last year, that's best quarterback in the NFC type of stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, they were 6th in DVOA offensively last year. And as you mentioned, not like a true game changer yet at wide receiver, but sort of an embarrassment of riches, like a lot of guys. Watson, Wicks, Reed, Luke Musgrave at tight end. There are pieces there for them to be really good. I just think Detroit, as we get to, I think both of us, they're in their window right now, right?
This is it.
They were real close last year. They feel like they're a better team this year. Been together another year. They know what Goff does well, what he doesn't do well. Added some pieces in free agency. I mentioned DJ Reader being a big one for them.
Draft Marion Arnold.
Yeah, Marcus Davenport opposite Aiden Hutchinson. I'm not saying Marcus Davenport, he hasn't really shown us that he's that guy, but I don't know. There's no question that there's talent there. Maybe having Hutch on the other side kind of unlocks him and makes him a better player. I am a Brian Branch stan. Do the kids still say that these days?
Oh yeah.
He's just a really good football player. Talk about him playing more safety than nickel this year. I would continue to deploy him the way they did in the past. I just think he's that kind of player. But just a really good football team that's really poised for now. Look, there's pressure on them, which maybe they haven't ever had or haven't had in many moons, in terms of people expect them. They were 12-5 last year. They get to the last step, the NFC Championship before losing to San Francisco. So there's more on them. Can they answer that? I feel like they can. I feel like it's a pretty mentally tough football team.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you mentioned there. I think Detroit wins the division because I think it's just a safer pick. I just think it's easier to bet on what we saw the last 18 months from them over what I saw from the Packers the last 2 months. I guess it's a compliment to Jared Goff, and you obviously have one of the funniest Jared Goff clips in the history of the Super Bowl. I still just like, I am a huge Goff proponent of him being properly respected for what he is. What I'm a little worried about, and I think this is fair, he doesn't move great. And I think we saw it last year a little bit in the NFC title game. It's hard when, his pressure starts getting home, it gets ramped up a little bit. He does get a little tight in the pocket, things tighten up a little bit for him. I just think home field advantage is going to be big for them because I really feel like it's Goff in a dome and the whole 9 yards and all these different things. And it's not that he's not a good player. Like, I can't emphasize this enough. He's a damn good player. He was worthy of the first pick when he was drafted, and he's been really successful in the NFL. He's not an elite guy, and if you don't have an elite guy, I feel like being at home and being in your comfortable setting is the most important thing. The offensive line's really good for Detroit. We know that. Amon-Ra St. Brown's awesome. He got paid. Jameson Williams, to me, is the kind of a big X factor here. What are we doing here?
Right.
It's now, it's year 3 of, oh my God, look at this camp highlight from Jameson Williams. Speed's elite. He had the one outlier year at Alabama. We obviously know that, and it's really unfortunate what happened. I thought he was an awesome prospect.
Yep.
The gambling stuff, the injury, there's just a myriad of things. He's had some drops, etc. Can he be a legit number 2, or can he just be? Is he really a 3 that becomes a 2 because they have Laporta? Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs in year 2, we saw a lot there. He's kind of in that Bijan Breece Hall class of like, oh my God, like the next guy after the guys after McCaffrey and Henry when those guys are getting closer. Like that's the next group. Defensively, they try to add a lot. They added Terry and Arnold, as you've mentioned. Carlton Davis there. Like, they've tried to address some of the corner stuff that's been an issue. They were not a good pass defense last year, or just defense in general. Like, they weren't. Aaron Glenn's an awesome guy, Jets legend, the whole 9 yards, and he was getting a lot of head coaching buzz, but like the defense was not so subtly pretty bad. My concerns again with Detroit are just this. They're a playoff team. They should win the division. They should be probably the second favorite in the NFC, maybe the third, depending on how much you like the NFC East. All's true, all's fair, and it's not even being negative. I just have questions around pressure's on you now. They're kind of lucky to win that Rams game, I think. I think McVay and the Cooper Kupp drop are big moments in the way we look at that. But they also should have beaten San Francisco and are very unlucky not to win that game. So, whatever. It evens out. Sure. Sometimes when teams get really close and then there's a lot of pressure the next year, we see a bit of a drop-off. That's why I think there'll be a 12-win team, which doesn't sound like a drop-off, but I think people are like, oh my God, Detroit's like even more stacked. They're going to go 14-3 and cakewalk to this division, cakewalk to the NFC title game against San Francisco and run it back. Maybe it happens. I just – don't you feel like they're going to be really damn good, but there's going to be a little more adversity this year? I feel like last year they kind of coasted to the NFC title game in a sense. Outside of that Rams game, I never felt like – I don't know. I felt like they were always beating the Bucs. I never felt like that game was really close, even though it was. And I felt like they were very much belonged on the same field, if not better than San Francisco for large portions of that game. And they don't need to be at home. I just want to clarify, like, they obviously can win outside. It's just a lot of pressure on them now, and they've gone through the cycle, unfortunately, which is what we do with all these teams. The Chiefs very much were in it. The underdog team, it's the hot upstart team. The Bengals were like this. Everyone loves them, and now they're kind of the team that all the other fan bases aren't so happy about anymore, and they're a little get under your skin a little bit.
They become now, Will. They become the team that people circle.
Yeah,
and it's a different.
They're loud. They're a loud team.
Yes.
It's a loud fan base.
Yep.
One question I have for you, and you covered Bill for 20 plus years, and the whole thing. Dan Campbell has obviously got a lot of heat for last year with the kicking and going for it, and it's a lot of bravado. And I love Dan Campbell. I thought the press conference of getting mad at him for saying the kneecap thing and whatever. We've all been down the road already. But he's a guy again that is now kind of in that he's got so much praise that you wonder if the pressure is rapid up here and ramped up. How does he handle it? I think he'll be great. Does he back off of who they are, or does he just full throttle and double down? Because I always wonder with coaches, McVay got a lot of heat. That Super Bowl didn't change stuff up and came back and adjusted. Kyle's gotten a lot of heat, and I don't know that he's really adjusted. He's just really awesome, and he's kind of just is who he is. So which is Dan Campbell going to be? What do you think on that? I think that's one question mark we never talk about, but it is a bit of a talking point of just good coach. Are you in that elite tier that's going to get your team to a Super Bowl?
I'd be surprised if he doesn't double down. I just think it's his
Yeah.
personality. I think that's the personality he wants for his football team, which, as you mentioned the kneecap opening press conference, but like, I'm setting the tone. This is who we're going to be, and we're not going to waver. And, I think that's, in fact, if he went in the other direction or if he backed off a little bit, I wonder if he's Dan Campbell anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and I wonder if guys would look at him and go, wait, you've been telling us for whatever it's been now, 3 years, that this is how we're going to be, and now you're not following through because maybe something didn't go right or you got critiqued in the postseason for that decision. I did want to touch on a couple things that you said quickly before we get out of here. The Aaron Glenn piece of this, they kept the staff together. I think everybody thought Ben was going to leave, and he didn't.
There's an argument both guys were going to get jobs.
Yeah, and Aaron got buzz, and again, he's here. Aaron wants to play in your face man-to-man. It's how he was as a player, right? That's what he wants to do. And I think they went out and gave him more tools for that, right? Like, so you traded for Carlton Davis, but you draft Terrion Arnold, you draft Ennis Regstraw, who maybe you're not expecting a ton from him this year, but maybe he's the Davis replacement. But it's sort of that same, he's a physical guy. Like, if you look at his tape at Missouri, it's kind of fun to watch, like, to see this corner who thinks that, like, he was built like a safety, like he just wanted to get involved in all that stuff. So they gave him more pieces. And now maybe is he free to do a little bit more stuff? Does he trust it a little bit more? Because, as I mentioned, like, they didn't have anyone opposite Hutchinson. Maybe they get that from Davenport. And I think the other thing I did want to mention is the offensive line. They're really good. They're getting old. Bunch of guys over 30 now in that group. So, guys play longer. Offensive line's a little different. Like, I don't know that you can count on Glasgow, Ragnow, Decker, Zeitler, all over 30. Zeitler's like, 35? I mean, he's been around forever. So, like, it's
not even just the quality of play sometimes. It's the 1 week injury that's really a 3 week injury. It's the 3 week that's a 6 week. Yeah, it's a good point.
And when does that happen? Like, it's one thing if it happens in mid-September. Okay, well, he wasn't, we didn't have him, or he wasn't the same player from weeks 3 through 7. Okay, but then when January rolls around, as best you can be, he's healthy and playing at a high level. Those nicks and bruises, they last longer. Those injuries last longer when you get older. And, I know there was some discussion in the offseason about maybe trying to infuse some youth in there. And I think they just looked at it like, look, we're good to really good. And let's just keep the veteran presence going and just try to, finish the job here. But I'm just curious that's it's a really good group. It's probably it's easily a top 10 group. You could make the argument maybe it's a top 5 group when they're playing well, but you got to be healthy. And when you start to get older, it's a little bit different. So
it's not like 1 or 2 guys are older. We'll get to the Jets offensive line where it's like 1 or 2 guys are older. It's like literally everyone but Penei Sewell is like literally better. And he had
the injury. Yeah. So that, and like, God, if he's hurt, like, he's such a difference maker in left tackle. That's massive. Like, we're not even talking about him in the age group, but if Sewell's not Sewell or Sewell's not playing, that's Jared would be very skittish in the pocket, I think.
Yeah, we don't really want to see that.
No. All right, that's going to put a wrap on this edition of All 32. We got more to come this week because I owe you one. And we're going to hit the AFC East and the NFC East, which obviously the AFC East can make the case. Again, there's 3 teams that could be playoff teams, and then maybe 3 teams that could win the division. And then who knows about the NFC East? Who knows? We'll get into that, though, later on. And we'll get cuts coming. There's all kinds of stuff happening. I'm sure there'll be some moves that surprise all of us, and we'll talk about it coming up on the next edition of All 32.